All right, so I want to start right out though with a little bit of meditation, just to bring everybody into a space of as much silence as might be possible for you. And what I want to say about silence is that it is not a lack of noise. There's a expression from Christ that I love. It's somebody had asked him, one of his disciples, "What is the sign of an awakened one?" And his answer is, it is movement and repose. So there's always both happening. There's a reposing, a silence, a resting into yourself. And at the same time, there is movement. So that movement could even be happening while you're sitting still. So it doesn't mean to quiet everything. That movement also might be where silence is bringing you into some kind of activity, some kind of movement toward attending to something in your life in an outward way. But what I want to focus on today is inner resolve, how through silence, there's a great capacity within each and every one of us to resolve, to settle, to fall so deeply into yourself that layers, whatever layers of thinking and emotion and the stories that we tell ourselves that we get hooked into, how these stories can become unleashed and you can start to see the mechanics behind those stories, how they're formed, what are the core beliefs, and how we can tend to just become fascinated by these stories and hook into them. And notice too that these stories are always happening in linear time, either in the past, or what might be happening even in just the next moment in the future. So when we enter silence, when this is our aspiration to fall into a quietude, we're falling into timelessness. So we're coming out of linear time and we're letting ourselves drop into a quietude that is always here, into this space of stillness that asks for nothing. And the entry point is always allowing everything to be as it is. So endeavoring from the start to not need to change anything. So let's just start here in the beginning here, just to whatever it is that's happening for you in your mind, in your emotions, whether they be pleasant or unpleasant, whatever happened this morning, whatever concern there might be about what's going to happen next. Just breathe. Breathe that here. So there isn't any energetic impulse for anything to change. So what happens for me, and I invite for you, is there's a softening. So let yourself be soft. If we're looking for something to change, already there's a rigidity that starts to come on board. It's kind of like a contracting, an energy that closes us off from what's here. So invite the breath to breathe you more fully here. So breathing in and allowing the breath to expand, to widen, to deepen. And if there's any thought floating through the mind about a right or a wrong way to be. Just notice that again, allowing. We often hear, very often in meditation, that we want to somehow stop the mind from thinking. So if that's part of your training, how you've been schooled to meditate, just notice that and see if you can soften around it. Give space for that kind of tendency to be here. And notice that as soon as you allow that there's a space that is able to open between thoughts. So rather than a rigid kind of rapid movement of thought, as you allow, you give more space. And it's almost as if you can start to feel the spaciousness of you widen behind you, beneath you, to include all of you. So silence is already here. So this is it. This is the quietude of you. It's a quality of space. And in this spaciousness, there may be all kinds of movement. Now let your attention fall between, in those spaces between thought. And as you allow this falling to happen, then even attention can soften, can drop, can fall. So it's as if here you're coming out of linear time, coming out of past, future, all of the ways that the personality may function. But here, your essence is timeless. It doesn't qualify, doesn't have a concern of past, future. And timelessness is the territory of the soul, you could say. Your essence, the spirit of you, the movement of your soul. It doesn't move in time. So at any time you notice that that attention is attending to particular thoughts, it's not a problem. It's not wrong. It's not right. Just notice that it's happening and give that space to happen. So there isn't any rigidity. There isn't a contraction around it. And you open more as space. Out of mind, out of personality. Here. Sometimes we speak about the personality when it's caught in stories, the repetitive pattern of stories. And the more that they're moved away from the experience that they're telling, the more distorted they become. And sometimes we refer to this as a trance, like a dream, living a dream, because it isn't actually happening now. It's past. It's finished. So then we can be curious as to what is our interest in this story. And notice that it's a habit of the personality to reconcoct it, to retell it, to bring itself back into linear time. So let that storytelling habit unravel. Just fall here. And you may feel a sense of disorientation as you fall out of time into here, timelessness that is only space. There's a quality of feeling suspended, perhaps, for a moment as you unhook any holding, any clinging, any grasping. It's like we're unhooking the anchor to the personality, to the storyteller, that for many is a strong anchor in the personality. So let that unhook itself. And let yourself fall. It's a falling that doesn't really feel like anything. It's a nothingness. To let yourself not know anything about you, about anything. To come here. And notice that there's a delightfulness. It's very satisfying because when you fall out of mind, when you fall out of time, out of the trance of the personality, whatever gets created and retold over and over again, there's an exhaustion with that, and you can feel very top heavy, very confined to mind and the committee of the mind. But here, none of that is happening. I mean, it may show itself, it may come in and go, all according to how much you really aspire to be free of the storyteller, to fall out of time and to rest more in the quietude of you, which is very nourishing. It nourishes us in a way that nothing else can. So drop here. Fall here. Silence is akin to consciousness. It's another word for an aspect of consciousness that is quiet. It has a very powerful energy to it. It's in many ways you could say it's our potential, our unborn potential is full of possibility. And part of this potential is to be able to open up a seeing, to be able to see how the personality has constructed itself out of beliefs, core beliefs, out of conditioning. It can open us to seeing old psychic patterns. And as this is opened by the unborn potential of consciousness, there's absolutely nothing that you need to do. The personality cannot get involved. It's not necessary. It's almost as if it opens a fire, a flame, both, where this fire is more like an anchor to the ground of your being, and the flame is a burning off of layers of pattern conditions. And it's ignited solely by your willingness to relax here, to let attention fall here through the cracks, through any slight crack, it doesn't matter, just fall here. So in this way, silence The quietude of you is an incredible medicine for dissolving the psychic patterns, the habits of personality, the hooking into linear time, to the repetitive habit of repeating to ourselves over and over again stories of the past. Each time they're retold, they have a different flavor because they're further from the actual memory. And the personality then concocts some kind of experience based on the story that's been told. So here is a unhooking this anchor to the personality and letting yourself be anchored in the quietude of you, in the potency of silence. Now it's very important to get that silence is here always. It's wide, it's deep. It doesn't have a boundary. It's timeless. And at the same time, there may be movements of energy, waves, there may be moments of hmm, hmm, wordless content. There's no word. It's just almost like having a delicious meal after not eating for a very long time. There's that deliciousness. There may be influxes or even outfluxes of toxic energy moving, dissolving, clearing. There may be a feeling of harmony as the emotional content of stories opens. And these energies can be transmuted. Dark energies can become very light. Hard, toxic feelings can clear. And none of this, as it's happening, needs to be understood. The only part of us that wants to understand is the analytical part of the mind. So then again, that would mean that the personality is reconstructing itself. So just if that's happening, or whenever it happens, just notice it and give it space. Nothing's wrong. There are no mistakes. It's an evolution of falling out of linear time into timelessness. So let yourself rest here for a little bit. You don't need to be concerned with how long. I'll let you know. Just letting everything go. Nothing to hold on to. Falling, falling, falling here, here, here. Anchoring here, rooting, grounding, falling behind, beneath, before. To your unborn potential. There's nowhere to go. There is nothing to do. All is here. All is here. You don't have to know what it is. Just be here. Now you can continue to listen with eyes opened or eyes closed. I want to say a few more things. There's a progression. In one sense, your timeless nature, silence, is always here. It's the constant. And then, in another sense, there's a progression as timelessness, as you fall out of linear time and the habit of reconstructing a known, a defined, a definition for yourself as a personality. So you could say that this is the process of awakening. In one sense, it's instantaneous because you are always here. You haven't gone anywhere. And in another sense, it's an unfolding, like a progression. So I want to give a couple of tips on how to be in this unfoldment. Now, in one stage, especially in the beginning, as you're beginning to disidentify with the mind and be able to be the witness and be able to observe and to kind of come behind yourself, to notice and to start to soften and let patterns open and let yourself fall between thought, to come out of linear time with a past, a present, and a future. As you're unraveling thought and becoming less fascinated with your stories, with the stories that we tell ourselves, and they start to lose their grip. At a certain point, it's important to perhaps be in the presence of another person who has a strong presence or is very awake in their consciousness, and to be able to give voice to the actual experience as it's come out of the distorted way of being told through the mind. Because often experience that is hooked onto and repeats itself happened a very long time ago. It's over with, but it's held onto by the mind, and it continues to refuel itself, and it becomes distorted. So it isn't actually even what happened. It's kind of then layers get added onto it, and we gather evidence, to kind of make it more concrete and solid. But when that's no longer the case, then when there's so much dissatisfaction with the tendency to tell ourselves a story about ourselves over and over again that creates suffering, when that becomes so dissatisfying, it's going to start to open and open and open. And then as you fall into yourself as presence and you're able to observe, then you're actually starting to get more to the actual experience, the energy of it, the charge of it, the true charge that might still be living in the system, which is more true because we are human beings and we have experience. We carry experience with us. So there isn't. This isn't a problem. It's part of being a human being. So at one point here where this is unraveling, it's important to be able to give the raw energy of it a voice. I do this exercise called deep listening, and you can actually fall into the energy of the experience, the raw energy of it, without having an overlay of a story on top of it. And then the energy of it can be given a voice so that it can discharge. So that's an important stage to be able to have that happen And sometimes we're not always finished with that because this is a never ending process in a sense. And some of our experiences are tucked very deeply in the psyche or in the body. And silence is what allows the layover, what's been added to by retelling the story. It allows that to be lifted so you can see the actuality of it and let that empty out. So that's an important part. And so sometimes we need to work with somebody, to be able to sit with somebody else and to be able to give the energy, the raw energy of the experience closer to the actuality of the experience, to give it a voice and to let it discharge. And then the energy of that can transmute. Okay, so that's one part, one part to be aware of. And I know many of you that are listening that listen to me a lot and already know this, or you already know it anyways. And then another part of it, which is incredibly important and valuable, which I'm not sure gets spoken about a lot, and I feel I don't even speak about it a lot, and I could speak about it more. And that is the direct experience of silence. And I spoke in the meditation a little bit about what this might feel like, where you feel deep nourishment, where something inside of you feels touched, like you settle. There's a settling. There's a true quieting. There's a harmonization, or there's an insight. There's a deep knowing that, wow, this is who and what I am. And this can come about not only through sitting, but it's any kind of experience that takes us out of time to timelessness, to a timeless moment. It could happen when you walk outside at night and you look up at the sky. Like last night, there was a beautiful, I think the moon was full, and there was stars, and it was a very captivating moment of depth and richness that touches the soul. It touches something inside that's universal, and where you feel the connectedness of all things. Like in that moment, there's the experience of I am the moon. There's no division. There's a universal connectedness. It's your connectedness to all things. You could call that the unity principle. The same thing with the sun setting. And it's as if it touches your soul. There's a nourishment. Or another experience, say you've connected with another being, maybe like a dance. And there isn't any sense of a personality as you're just kind of moving together without self-concern, without, thought is just not there. And again, there's a nourishment that happens. So what I want to say about these experiences, these are the ones that we don't need to give voice to. It's as soon as we try to give voice, even as I just did, it takes away from it. It's kind of like trying to take a photograph of nourishment, of inner nourishment. You can't really capture it. You can try, but it's many steps removed from the actuality of the experience of it. So often people speak of these of glimpses of awakening to true nature, to an aspect of the multifaceted jewel that you are. When this opening, these glimpses, this deep nourishment happens, then you're not really able to hold it. You can't really repeat it. And it's important not to try to, because what happens here is you're diffusing the energy of it, its healing potential, its nourishment to the soul. So these experiences come to us for a reason, and the reason is for a deep nourishment to happen, and it allows us to come into unity, you could say, with the movement of our souls. So it's a very deep, deep nourishment that supports our embodiment and doesn't need to be given a voice. And also at a certain point down the line, it may feel that that's completed itself. And you may be able to speak about it then and not have it lose its value. So there's many facets that are happening here, to this. You could call this your sadhana, your practice, to be able to be sensitive enough to yourself, to what needs to be given voice so that it can gain more clarity, and then it can empty out, and what needs to be held close and allowed to come even closer so that it can nourish the movement of your soul, so that you can actually allow the silence, the quietude of you, that touching, to become more of you, to be your natural state, to be timeless.